Howdy folks. So recently I had a comment on this video I did here of my IFR flight from Invercargill to Dunedin. Scott S says, really enjoyed your video. I fly the Timaru Wellington return route in FS2020. Would be great to see you do a video on that route. On another video I had a comment that said 50 minutes is too long for a video. Can't watch it all. So I decided, you know what? Stuff that, I'm going to double down and just do a really detailed long video for my old mate Scott here of a Timaru to Wellington. Now I won't do the return sector at this point, but we'll start off just with Timaru to Wellington. So how would we approach this? This is just how I would do it in real life. So we've got a number of resources available to us before we even walk out to the airplane, where we can plan the flight, understand what to expect, and start to brief ourselves in anticipation of doing the flight. So the very first thing we do is ask the question, how on earth do we do an IFR flight from Timaru to Wellington? How do we get there? So what we do is we go to the NZAIP.net here, aip.net.nz, and we dig up the Timaru charts, and we'll find this one here, and it's called Standard Route Clearances, and this is pretty unique to New Zealand. And these are so-called route designators for common routes you might fly from Timaru Airport. So there's two here, one to Christchurch and one to Wellington, lo and behold. So this is called the Timaru Wellington 2 route, and it tells us exactly how to fly it. So it tells us we're going to fly the Quebec 196 airway to Charlie Hotel, which is Christchurch, then the Yankee 393 airway to Wellington. So these always start and finish at a navigation aid. So in Timaru it's going to be the Tango Uniform NTB, and in Wellington it's going to be the Whiskey November VOR. And it does tell us for flights at or above 11,000 feet, maintain 10,000 feet to LDAC. So that's going to be applicable to us, and we'll see a little bit more about what that means in a few moments. So let's have a look. How do we actually know what this routing is? So there's a few ways we can do it. The first way is just to jump into SkyVector and type it in. So I've typed in Timaru, Quebec 196 to Charlie Hotel, Yankee 393 to Wellington with my departure and destination. And this is the New Zealand IFR charts, and boom, there it is. So we see this nice pink line shows us that route structure. So essentially here's Timaru down here, here's the NDB, overhead Christchurch, and there's going to be a few waypoints along the way. So if we zoom in on those, we can get a bit of more information. So we can see here's LDAC. This is the point it said if we're going via LDAC, we need to be above 10,000 feet at LDAC. Or sorry, if we're cruising above 11,000 feet, which we will be. So that's LDAC. There's a point here called Ivron. There's Christchurch. We're onto the Yankee 393 here to Greta, to Luxev. Up here to Wards, right on the top corner here of the South Island, Omdocs, and then straight to Wellington. So that's cool. So that's the route that we're going to fly. Now the next thing we need to know is Wellington has runway 3416, so more or less a north-south runway. What's the wind doing in Wellington? Because once we get to this point here, it's going to make a big difference to what standard arrival we're going to fly into Wellington. We're either going to just turn right somehow and go straight here up to runway 34, or we're going to circle around and come down onto runway 16 for an ILS approach. So I've logged into MetFlight here, so this is available to New Zealand pilots. So if you've got a license number, you punch that in there with certain details, and you will get yourself a local weather. So I'll find that here. Okay, so this is what we get from MetFlight. So basically we've punched in the relevant airport codes, and we've got a bunch of things. So we've got text listings of all the SIGMETs that are active at the moment, which we'll come back to shortly. Here's a graphical depiction of where those SIGMETs apply to. So we can see there's a red one here, which is covering our route of flight just at the top of the North Island. This is Cook Strait between North and South Islands here. And this is showing that it's SIGMET number 20, active on the 9th of September 0421 to 0821. It's a forecast for severe turbulence from the surface to 6,000 feet and not changing. Basically, it's you can see this one says it's weakening, but this one means that it's not changing at the moment. So something to keep in mind. We'll have another look at that on the SkyVector chart shortly. And now we've got our weather itself. So we've got METARs and TAFs. The METAR is basically the prevailing conditions at the moment at those airports, and we can see the wind speed here is in true, and this wind direction is true, and the speed is in knots. And up here we've got our terminal area forecast, the TAFs, also in true and knots. So here's the route of flight. We've got Timaru, the METAR. It's automatically generated by a station at the airfield, so no one looking out the window typing it down. So these can be subject to error because it's automatic. But it's basically it's 130 degrees true at 4 knots. So the runway heading is going to be in magnetic, so it's 020 is the runway magnetic, and we can take off 20 degrees, so basically we're going to have crosswind because of the magnetic variation, that is. Visibility is 20 kilometers, overcast at 3,000 feet, temperature is 11, dew point is 8, and the QNH 1021. And we've just got a couple of en route alternates here, so Christchurch and Woodburn, in case we had a problem with the aircraft and we had to divert en route. It's handy to know what the conditions are like at some of those airports you might consider diverting into. So Christchurch being the first obvious one. We can see it's a slight southerly there, so it'll be runway 20 at Christchurch and otherwise good conditions. Woodburn is also pretty good, that's 0725 there, so it'll be runway 07 and pretty good conditions. And finally, Wellington, so this was active on the 9th of November today, 0630 Zulu. Local time New Zealand is Zulu plus 13 because it's daylight savings there. So that will be 19:30 in the evening. It's automatically generated again, 160 at 24 knots, so we know straight away that it's runway 16 is going to be the active runway in Wellington. Viz is greater than 10 kilometres. Clouds scattered 2,400 feet, broken 2,900 feet, broken 3-4, temperature 12 and 8. Pretty much the same as what we've got down here in Timaru. QNH 1016. Temporary fluctuations or temporary visibility of 6,000 metres in moderate showers of rain. And the remark here, Kaukel, which is just around the coast slightly from Wellington, is 150 at 49 knots. So this gives us an idea that there's quite a bit of wind out there today, 50 knots just blowing through the strait. And our alternate would be Palmerston North, which is just slightly north of about 20 minutes flying, or maybe a bit more north of Wellington. That's 0725 is the runway, so it's 160 at 15, so it'll be runway, well, we could use either runway really, probably 25, and the light rain there, so a bit of a shower going through Palmy, and it's 10 degrees. Alrighty, we've also got our TAFs, so it's a relatively short flight, so we wouldn't expect the conditions to change too much, but we can have a look at Wellington's TAF. So this is the forecast. Another rule of thumb, the longer the forecast, the worse the weather is. So you can see Palmerston North's got quite a long one. Wellington's got a fairly long one as well. So this was issued on the 9th of November at 0501 Zulu, and it's active from 06 on the 9th to 0600 on the 10th. So it's pretty much just been issued actually. In fact, yeah, so this is current for our time, and the forecast wind is 180 degrees true at 25, gusting 35 knots, so it's definitely not going to change runways in the time that we'll be there. Viz greater than 10, scattered 3, broken 4 tempo, so temporary fluctuations between 0600 and 1000, so for the next 4 hours from pretty much now, 6,000 metres and moderate showers of rain, and that is precisely what we saw here, tempo 6,000 metres and showers of rain. So yep, they're pretty much forecasting what they're actually looking at, which is cheating. And then later on, the weather deteriorates even further to 4,000 metres and moderate rain. But that's all we need. 2,000 foot wind, 180 at 45 knots. So that tells us that it's pretty windy up there, and we expect some turbulence on the approach. And obviously we've got a minimum and maximum QNH for the period of the forecast, so this 24-hour period. There'll be another TAF that comes out later on anyway, but for now, conditions will not change too much from as they are currently. So that's all we need to know about that. Quite a handy feature of SkyVector is this, the SIGMETs are overlaid, so we can see this blue box here. If I just hover over that, shows NZZC, so that's the New Zealand Flight Information Region. SIGMET 20 is out, and it's in brackets there. It tells us it's for turbulence. If I click on that, here's that whole SIGMET, which we saw before. So essentially it's saying severe turbulence forecast, and it gives you the coordinates of basically this box, which is painted, and the time in which that's applicable, and it is from surface to 6,000 feet. Severe turbulence strength, not strengthening, strength, no change. So that's just what we read before. Here's Palmerston North up the top here, so this would be our alternate. Okay, so great, so we know it's runway 16. So now we have to have a look at the approaches that we're going to fly, or the whole procedure really. So we can start off with Timaru. So as I mentioned, we'll depart off runway 02, so we can fly this Bidney 1 Papa departure, and that takes us up to that point LDAC here. So basically we'll brief this now, so it saves us some time in the aircraft. So it tells us that for all departures, it's minimum net climb gradient of 3.3%, which is 200 feet per nautical mile, unless higher stated, and that is standard minimum. So unless generally that's what you expect on all departures, is going to be 200 foot per nautical mile. Runway 02, Bidney 1 Papa departure. It's an RNAV GNSS departure, so we can program that into our FMS. And it's saying track 017 to 600 feet, turn right, track 060 to Bidney. The important word to note here is track. Okay, it says track, not heading. So what that means is that we want to fly on a track of 017. So if the wind is, if there's a crosswind, which there is today because it was 120, that means we need to adjust our heading to fly a track of 017. If it said fly heading 017, that means they don't care about the wind and we'd end up drifting off whatever that track was. Okay, so in this case they want us to fly track 017, so compensate for the wind at 600 feet, turn right 060 track again, so it's not just heading 060, it's track 060 to Bidney. And from Bidney, which is just this arbitrary fix in the sky, we turn left 014 and that takes us all the way up to here to LDAC. That's about it for that, not too much else. These are all other departures that don't concern us. We do have an MSA here, which is, as long as we're flying this, then we're good to go, but the minimum sector altitude is the lowest altitude we can fly safely within 25 nautical miles of the ARP, which stands for Aerodrome Reporting Point. Sometimes they use a navigation aid to specify that. In this case, it's just the aerodrome itself, and you'd see that actually on the airport chart. If we brought up the Timaru airport chart, there'd be a point on it, which is the ARP. In any case, basically to the west, 8,400 feet, so quite high towards the Alps, and to the east, 5,800 feet. Alrighty, so that's the departure that will fly. Now, moving to the other end, we can have a look at the arrivals we can fly, and there's a lot of information on this chart. So the key thing to figure out is where are we going to come into this chart, and therefore what star can we expect to fly. So all these words everywhere. So remember that our route here took us all the way up to Wards, Omdocs. Well, in fact, the last waypoint is actually, no, it is Omdocs, because you see the Yankee 393 goes all the way to Wellington. So our flight plan will have us going Wards, Omdocs, and if you have a look on here, we can see Wards, Omdocs. So this means we can see it is an RNAV star for runway 16, so that's what we want. And we can see Wards, Omdocs here. So that means we'll be flying a Wards 3 Bravo arrival for runway 16. So we just look for the words. Here they are, Wards 3 Bravo arrival. It's an RNAV arrival, okay? So from Wards track 013 to Omdocs, so we'll fly 013 to Omdocs. It shows us that it's an 8 nautical mile sector at not below 2,400 feet. At Omdocs, at or above 6,000 feet, okay? Cross Omdocs at or above 6,000 feet, noted. Track 004 via Phoenix to Hewitt, okay? 004, it's 27 nautical miles, not below 1,800 feet to Phoenix, and then Hewitt. Cross Phoenix at or above 5,000 feet. Okay, at or above 5,000, we see that. Further 15 nautical miles, 2,400 feet minimum to Hewitt. And cross Hewitt at or below 6,000 feet, max indicated airspeed 220 knots. Okay, that's all written here as well. Then it's a right turn, so this is like a base turn, isn't it? Track 071 to Whitby, so that's a 6-mile sector at not below 2,700 feet. And Whitby is the initial approach fix. And cross Whitby at above 3,000 feet at a max indicated airspeed of 190 knots. Cool, so basically straight up the side here, turn right to Whitby, and then here's the runway down here. So that's pretty straightforward, isn't it? It's more or less a straight line to a base point and then into Whitby, which is the initial fix. No worries at all. So we can see MSA again, it's based on the aerodrome reporting point. We'll be coming into the west of the airfield, so we'll be in this quadrant or sector. 4,800 feet is the minimum. As we pass north of the field and actually begin that arrival, we will be entering this one, so 6,600 feet will be applicable. But as long as we're flying this, you can see these are the minimum altitudes for us, so this is not as such a concern. A couple of other points. Navigation requirement, RNAV1 GNSS required. So this tells us that the position tolerance, I guess you could say, around the required navigation performance that we need. So we need to know our position within 1 nautical mile of where we are to fly this. Okay. And I think that's it. There's a hold at Whitby here. There's a note about that, but we won't do the hold. Okay, and that's all that frequencies across the top here. We can see again, we can fly this with all categories of aircraft, and maybe noteworthy that the elevation at Wellington is 41 feet, so essentially sea level. Alrighty, moving right along, ILS DME runway 16 at Wellington here. Elevation 41 feet, threshold elevation is 41 feet. Bunch of frequencies again. Okay, here's Whitby. So we won't be joining by the arc, of course, because we're coming in from Hewitt here, 071. So we'll be coming in this way somewhere, like this. And from Whitby, we'll just turn inbound. So we can see that it's a ILS DME as India Echo Bravo 110.3 is the frequency. Okay, and the inbound course is 161. So from Whitby, which is a flyover waypoint, because you can see it's a solid triangle compared to this one, which is a blank, or it's not a solid triangle. So Whitby's located at 12 DME, and then we make our way down here. Let's have a look at the profile. So Whitby, platform altitude 3,000 feet. We expect to intercept a 3-degree glide path. It should tell us here somewhere. There it is, 3 degrees at 9.1 DME. And make our way down here. Final approach fix is at 6 nautical miles. We check the altitude at 1970 to ensure the accuracy of the glide slope. And then we make our way down to our minimum. So again, it's a Cat 1 ILS approach. In fact, it's not a Cat 1 because the minimum is higher. So you notice on the one into Christchurch, we had Cat 1 here and it was 200 feet, and I said that was standard. So we can see in Wellington, it's actually higher than 200 feet. So it's not a standard Cat 1 approach. So the minimum is 300 feet indicated, 260 feet above the ground, with a minimum visibility of 1,500 meters. So we don't have RVR stations, so the minimum is not 550 meters based on RVR. It's just 1,500 meters, which is actually quite high, and that's a testament to the often challenging nature of conditions in Wellington. Okay, that's cool. In the event of a missed approach, we will fly at a max indicated airspeed of 185 knots, which is relatively slow. Track 16122 Wellington DME. So again, we've got to change over to the VOR. So we're looking at the VOR DME rather than the ILS DME. To Wellington DME, intercept radial 1642 tax up at 3,000 feet. So we can see that here. So 2 nautical miles to Wellington DME, intercept the 164, tax ups out here at 8.1 nautical miles, which is kind of a weird place to put a fix, isn't it? 8.1 nautical miles. Why not 8.5? Why not 9? Why not 8? At 3,000 feet. Okay, what else we got here? We've got the holds all depicted here, which we're not too interested in right now. We can see Wellington VOR DME 1123, by the way, so we'll have that in nav2. And the MSA we've talked about before on the star. There's quite a few other details on this chart, so you can see there's a number of spot heights, which also alerts us to the fact that there's quite a bit of terrain around the Wellington airport. The highest being 3,088 feet, as denoted by this big arrow here. And we can see that these ones here show that there's actually a mast. So it's not just a hill, like these are just a hill. 1444 here with the triangle shows that's actually a mast, an aerial of some sort. And this one shows that there's actually a a light on the top of this mast at 1,814 feet. And OCC pairs are can't remember what OCC stands for, but I think the red means R means a red. So it's essentially a occasional flashing red light, basically. I can't remember exactly what that stands for. So we'll probably notice those on the way through. One thing to bear in mind is that just through this sector from, say, Whitby to this point, Cairns, or just slightly south of, as we come down this valley here, the terrain does actually get quite close to the aircraft. So we've still got good clearance, but you'll notice that on the radio altimeter that it actually decreases quite a bit until we get over the water here. Okay, so there's a couple of interesting features as well about Wellington, which I'll just point out while we're looking at the chart or zoom in. So you can see the airport's just nestled on this little sort of flat spot on the peninsula. Where's my photo? So you can see the way the airport is nestled in here with the bay. So we'll be coming in from the left here, from the north, and you get, this is quite high terrain. It's not as clear in this photo, and I took this photo myself actually, once upon a time. We'd just taken off from runway 16 on a beautiful day and did a right turn. So this was heading north, probably to Auckland or something. And we can see that the terrain here can cause quite a bit of turbulence, but we've got a nice straight wind, 160 coming straight ahead here. So we shouldn't have a whole lot of turbulence after we've crossed Cook Strait. It shouldn't be too bad at all. So nice, smooth, steady wind. And once we land, we'll vacate right off the runway. We'll aim for this taxiway here and onto this general aviation sort of apron on this side. This is the main terminal here, golf course. All right, so that's about all there is for the briefing. All right, here's the lads. Gladys is helping us out. So I've got this really cool gunmetal grey livery from the Mega Pack, I think it's called, which I've installed. Very cool, awesome machine. So here we are at Timaru. We jumped into the aeroplane, just got the aeroplane started. Of course, this bloody stupid thing doesn't stay in feather without cooking itself, so we'll have to move the thrust lever or power lever into this taxi range, and eventually the ITT will come back down, so disregard that. Yet another limitation of the sim. Okay, so here we are. I haven't really set anything up yet. I've literally just started the engine. First things first, we'll change our primary nav source to FMS. I've got nav 1 and 2 set on my RMI from last time. And yeah, so basically I'm just using the default weather. And you remember the METAR we looked at before had the QNH 1020. We've got 1018, so not too bad to be honest. So we'll let that stay as it is for now, and we'll go ahead and program our flight plan. So the best way I've found is not to use the Microsoft, the flight planner. Just do it all yourself in here. So we're at Timaru, so we'll kick it off. Timaru, and always put your destination in first. So you've got departure, destination, and now we can start adding waypoints as we go. So this is where things will get interesting. So let's start by adding our departure of 02, Bidney 1 Papa to LDAC. Let's load that. Cool. Okay, LDAC. Next point was Ivron. So let's go ahead and pop that in here. I've found it's best to put things in the order in which you're flying them. It just seems to sequence better. If you do the waypoints and then the SID, which is how you'd actually do it in real life, you'd do your route of flight and then the SID last. Unfortunately, the logic seems to work better if you put it in this way. So the next one was Greta. Like I said, I'm making a very, very long video. Try that again. But the good news is there's chapter markers, so if you get bored with all this business, then you can skip ahead to the bits that interest you. I know I will be. Likes Ev. Cool. Another thing in the real aircraft, you don't do this, you just type in the airway and the whole thing populates with all of the relevant wards, with all of the relevant fixes en route. You don't have to manually type in each waypoint. That's why we have the OMDOCs. That's why we have the airway structure in the first place. Well, not really, but it certainly helps. Okay, so that's our route of flight. We'll program, I'll tell you what, we'll put in the star now, arrival, Wellington. So it's going to be the Wards 3 Bravo arrival. No transition to 16. Let's load it. We'll just leave the approach off for now. Let's see what sort of a mess this has made. Okay, so we've got wards and OMDOCs already there. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to delete these. Let's see, Luxev, wards, OMDOCs. So it's already suspicious because I only deleted one point and it got rid of wards as well. So yes, as to what the airplane actually flies is anybody's guess at this point. Always a good idea to have a quick overview to see what's actually depicted in the box. Greta, Luxiv, Wards, Omdocs. Okay, I'm just missing the names on those points, but if you remember, that should be, let's see, Phoenix, and that should be Hewitt, and this should be Whitby into Wellington. So we just have to load the approach, but that's what we want to fly. Let's see if it actually works. Speed bugs, we'll go ahead and set VY for the departure. Let's see, what else can we set up here? No, that's all fine. PFD, FMS, nav source, we've done that. Minimums we don't need yet. I think we're just about good to go, so we can go ahead and set up our nav radios. So we'll start off with just 2000 standard IFR code. Oops, 2000, idiot. In New Zealand, in Europe it's 7,000, which is why you see that in many of the default aircraft. And for this here, let's just go ahead and put Christchurch up here initially, because that's our first sort of VOR en route. And we'll put Wellington 112.3 in here as well. Cool. Good to go. Now set up the FMS, the guidance panel, or there's various different names for this guidance panel, flight guidance panel, things like that. And we're going to do this pretty high because it's quite a long sector, long route. So we'll do this at 25,000 feet. So because we're going a bit higher, then it's going to mean a little bit more thought we'll have to go into the descent planning. So we'll obviously get to that point a bit later on. Okay, 25,000 feet. Let's go ahead and hit our toga button here. You can set flaps to take off while we're down here. And the heading, we'll go ahead and set that on 016 for the runway heading. And in fact, we can even arm nav, so FMS is selected there. So we're good to go. Alrighty, so I will see you lined up on the runway, ready for departure. Alright, here we are, lined up on the runway 02 here at Timaru, ready to go. We're all set, so remembering the departure, it's track 016 to 600 feet, and then a right turn track 060 to Bidney. So that's what we'll be doing. We've got initial separator still on, pitot heats are all on, lights are all set. Away we go. So if you remember from before, I just go to full power on my throttle, and then I just back it off a touch. I'll release the brakes here. Just got to watch that ITT and the torque. Okay, airspeed's alive. Okay, there's 80 knots. Rotate. Okay, touch the brakes, gear travels. Pitching up to my flight director. And looking initially for 120 knots. Flaps up. I hope flight level change there. That'll come back. There's 600 feet. So I'm turning right to track 060. Go for 140. And coming up to 060. And autopilot yaw damper goes on. ITT's come back. And we'll accelerate to 160. On the heading bag. So you can see how much of a heading change it made to track 060 to Bidney. But see, I don't believe it, right, because the needle's not even pointing on 060, so it's just not quite correctly programmed as far as I can tell. but we're all good. So we'll just keep an eye on this ITT now and the torque. So the limiting factor is ITT. As we climb, it's going to change over to torque being a limiting factor. So we'll turn the inertial separator off now. Turn off the lights here. Keep that heading back aligned in case we need to change over to it. Okay, we see our torque's increasing as we climb. Okay, so this will keep increasing. So we're going to need to start pulling the power back to ensure we don't over torque. 99, okay, reducing the power, just keeping an eye on that. This does happen in a turboprop, but probably not at quite the same rate that it's happening in the sim here. As it's gone up multiple percents of torque just within 1,000 feet. I'm just going to bring that back to say 95, and it just gives us a little room to play with, so I don't have to be fixated on this instrument. Okay, so we're 67 nautical miles to Christchurch or so. Okay, it looks like it's stabilised there. So the torques are not increasing. ITT is pretty steady. So it just seems that block between 4,000 and 5,000 feet we get a big increase in torque, and lower down we get a big increase in ITT, and then it settles down. Whereas in the real aircraft, what you'd expect to see is just a consistent, steady trend of increasing torque as the temperature decreases. We can see the cabin is pressurizing here as well. So we can see we've got a rate of climb of 499 feet a minute in the cabin. So this is the altitude of the cabin, and the differential pressure, so the pressure difference between the outside world and the cabin there is 3 psi. Right, we're past Bidney now, so that's completed the standard instrument departure. And so now we're making our way to LDAC en route. Increase the range. Oops. So now the torque's actually dropping again. So I can increase it back to 95 or so. So normally what should happen is the cabin's going to go to max diff, which is about 6 psi by the looks of things, so it should go up to about here, and then it'll start raising the cabin, so that it'll want to keep the cabin as low as possible, whereas in this case it seems to be climbing pretty much from takeoff, which you'll see a bit of these 10,000 feet, which you'll see a little bit of change, but perhaps not quite such a high cabin altitude this early on. But again, I haven't flown the TBM, so I'm not exactly sure how the pressurization system responds. So it could be bang on, who knows. So we can turn off the remainder of the external lights. So pulse lights off, we've got nav and strobe still on. That's pretty much all there is to it, there's not much up there. Next milestone will be transition at 13,000 feet, so we'll go to 1013. See, it says push standard, we push it, nothing happens. Pretty much just functions like pushing the B key as far as I can tell. Yep, so that's incorrectly modelled. Okay, torque's dropped a bit, so we can increase the power again. So, sure, very sensitive up here. And as we get higher, we can see our TAS is almost up to 200 knots. So as we get higher and our rate of climb starts to decrease, we can reduce our speed a bit, back to 150 knots and maybe even 140. We'll just see how it goes. This thing is performing pretty well. 13, so we'll go ahead and set 1013. Oops. Okay, 2992, passing 13.5 now. Okay, so these two are within tolerance of each other. So essentially what I'm doing is just calling out when we pass an altitude on here, and then setting the same barometric pressure and confirming that these two are in sequence with each other. if there was a big discrepancy, then that may indicate that the standby pedostatic system, or indeed the primary pedostatic system, has a bit of an issue with it. We can see that our rate of climb has really been pegged at 2,100 feet a minute all the way up here, so pretty good performance. Okay, so one of the cool features about this G3000 mod, if I can find it, is we can actually set up all of the data that we see across this top bar here. So there's all of these data fields. So at the moment you can see I've got ground speed, desired track, the actual track. So these are the same, which means we're on track. Estimated time en route for this particular waypoint. So from here to LDAC we've got 3.5 minutes to go. Distance to go to destination, or at least for the rest of this flight plan, is 243 nautical miles. And the distance to the next waypoint is 11.8 nautical miles, so I should probably swap those around. And then remaining en route time is 1 hour 14. So I think it would make more sense to swap those around. So let's do that now. So we can go down here and put distance to destination there, and distance to next waypoint there. There we go. So now we've got, in fact, we've got time, distance, distance, time. So maybe it makes more sense to go distance, time, distance, time. So let's change that to time. There we go. And we can change that to distance to next waypoint. Okay, so we've got distance and time to the next waypoint, distance, time to the destination. So that's a fairly logical flow there. Okay, still got the same rate of climb. Torque still 95. So we can see now we've got max differential pressure in the cabin, 6 psi. The cabin's still climbing. So that relief valve is just going to try and maintain 6 psi, and it'll just keep climbing the cabin, and it'll eventually, it won't go above 10,000 feet, because otherwise that would defeat the purpose of having a pressurized cabin, because the whole point is so we don't have to use oxygen. We've got about 5,000 feet to our top of climb. It's starting to lose a touch of performance, not much though. 220 knots ground speed and TAS, and we can see that we've got all of our wind is pretty much crosswind at this point. You can see that here. In fact, it's down here as well, even easier. What's happening outside? So the Canterbury Plains, looking out towards the Southern Alps. Okay, interesting. So now we can see the cabin differential pressure is gone. Well, it says 6. The limit is 6. I can't do much about that. I've got this on auto. So this could well be a bit of an issue. I haven't flown this thing this high before. So 6 is the max. So I'd say this is really just a programming issue with the G3000 mod for this aircraft. But as the altitude of the cabin climbs, then the diff pressure should start to reduce. So one thing we could do is reduce the rate of climb just to allow the cabin to catch up to our altitude. But we're almost at our cruise altitude anyway. But it should automatically increase this So if the cabin wasn't climbing fast enough, then it would just increase the rate of change. So it's just pegged on 499, it would increase that. So we've got 1,000 feet to go. And so this is already changed to Alt, but technically this should go to a capture mode, and it won't change to Alt until we're actually level at flight level 250. Nice smooth level off. You can see our TAS is really starting to accelerate here. Alright, that's it. Level at flight level 250, 33 miles south of Christchurch. Okay, so we can see that's already coming down to 6 psi. What these aircraft have is the normal pressure relief valve, which it's using to control the outflow to maintain that differential pressure, but there's also an emergency pressure relief valve which is set to open fully when it gets to the max. So at 6 it'll just open fully to ensure that the cabin doesn't get damaged by excessive pressurization. So if that was the case, we would see the rate of climb of the cabin really go up a lot, because essentially it's like opening a small door in the side of the airplane to let all that pressurized air out to try and equalize the pressure. But we can see that as the cabin continues climbing, this differential pressure will come down, so in a few moments that should actually drop back into its normal range. Even though 6 is the top, it shouldn't be flashing red at 6. But I presume the way it's actually programmed is, even though we only see it in whole numbers, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the limits, it's actually above 6, so there's a decimal point above that. There we go, so it was probably 6.123, something like that, and it's just clearly set up, so as soon as it crosses 6, then you get that warning, even though we can't measure it that precisely. Okay, so we're pretty much in the cruise here. I'll bring the torque back to 85% for the cruise. That will just help ensure slightly more economical fuel consumption. You can see gallons per hour fuel flow at 85 should be around 50. We've got heaps of gas. We've got at this altitude almost 4 hours of flying time. Okay, cabin's still climbing. So 85, 51 gallons. Everything is set up nicely. So now it's just going to keep flying north. So I'll get back to you shortly as we approach top of descent. Okay, back again. So we are making our way north. You can see there's a little bit of drift as the aircraft is not tracking directly over the ground, so we've still got that slight crosswind from the east by the looks of things. Pretty cool. So we're making our way up towards Kaikoura here, and at this point we have just passed Point Luxiv. We're on our way to Wards, which is where the Wards 3 Bravo arrival commences from. So the next thing to think about is the calculation of the top of descent point. So let's just start off by thinking about our rule of thumb: 25 times 3, 75 nautical miles. So let's just keep that in the back of our mind. Our rule of thumb tells us it's 75 nautical miles. Now the more precise way to do it is to make the calculation, so we'll take into account our ground speed. So our ground speed is 305 knots, we'll just call it 300, which is 5 nautical miles per minute. Okay, so that's the first bit of information we need. The next thing we need to know is our bottom of descent point, so that's going to be 3,000 feet at Whitby. Okay, so 3,000 feet at Whitby is our bottom of descent point, so that means we have to lose 22,000 feet, because we're at 25, so we've got to lose 22,000 feet. If we descend at 1,500 feet a minute, that means it'll take us 14.6 minutes to descend 22,000 feet. every minute we're travelling 5 nautical miles, so if we do that for 14.6 minutes, we're going to need 73 nautical miles over the ground. Now, if we add up all of the distances from Whitby all the way out here to Wards, then that comes up to 56 nautical miles. So if we say we need 73 for the descent, so we basically, if we just add 20 on to keep it simple, then that means our top of descent point is going to be 20 nautical miles prior to Wards. At the moment, it's 34 nautical miles, so we've got 14 miles before top of descent. So basically that would give us a top of descent point of say 73 nautical miles to Whitby, and we said at the start rule of thumb was 75, so pretty good. We're within 2 nautical miles using the rule of thumb compared to just working it out with this. Now, a couple of things to keep in mind though is that our ground speed probably will decrease in the descent, particularly in the lower altitudes. We won't be doing 300 knots anymore, so that means we'll actually need less track miles, but it's better to err on the side of descending early than it is to end up high. Okay, so I'm pretty happy to use 20 miles Wards as our top of descent point. The next thing to keep in mind is we do have these constraints on the way down. So it was OMDOX at or above 6,000, Phoenix at or below 5, Hewitt at or above 6. Okay, so this is something that we do need to keep in mind, that as we cross OMDOX, we will certainly be well above 6,000 feet, so that won't be an issue. Phoenix at or above 5, that it won't be an issue as well. So it's really just at or below 6 at Hewitt, so we just need to keep an eye on that too. Okay, so we've got 28 miles, so 8 miles to top of descent. Right, the scary bit, let's just align our heading bug in case this all goes weird. Let's do the approach, so we want to do an ILS approach for runway 34. Come on, you silly thing. Sorry, ILS 16 even. And we want to do that via Whitby. So this has only got the transitions via the 2 arc points, but we want to come in via Whitby. So what we can do is just, I really don't trust this, so I'm just going to go into heading mode now and load it and hope that weird things don't happen. Weird things are happening. And yeah. Oh, it's frustrating, isn't it? So let's see, let's remove that. Okay, cool. We got our arrival back by the looks of things. See what happens if we do that. Also weird things. So in that case, I'm not going to load the approach. We're just going to leave the star in there because that's all we need, and we'll just transition directly onto the ILS, okay? So that's no problems at all for us. The only thing I need to check, so we're just coming up to top of descent, so I'm going to get the altitude set up now. So bearing in mind that our minimum altitude is 5,000 feet or above at OMDOX, so we'll just set that here. And I need to double check my MSA anyway, so look, let's just set 10,000 feet initially. Vertical speed. And make our way down at 1,500 feet a minute. Oh, runaway BS. Okay, we got it, and I'll reduce the power a little bit so we can, because we can see we're starting to get into this area that had the SIGMET out for severe turbulence up to 6,000 feet, but we can see there's already a little bit of bumping around just even at this altitude because we've got quite a lot of high terrain here. With the wind coming from the east, we shouldn't expect to get any turbulence really, because this is just going to be the smooth air side. But try telling that to Microsoft Flight Simulator. Okay, so you can see our ground speed's crept up a bit. Alright, so while that's happening, I'll change back to nav. It's just going to tidy that up, and let's just have another check of our chart here. Okay, so 2400, 1800, 2400. So these are the route, the sector MSAs, 2700. So essentially 5,000 feet is the minimum altitude. So I can set that up, and then we don't have to worry about it until we then set 3,000 feet for the approach itself. Now, bearing in mind, because I'm not using ATC, In real life, you're not going to get a clearance like that because there's going to be traffic coming and going from Wellington, traffic moving around the country like all of these targets here are depicting. So they won't just clear us all the way down. There'll be intermediate levels. They generally do a pretty good job in New Zealand. In fact, they do an excellent job in New Zealand compared to a lot of countries I've flown in. So you'd expect some level offs though. We can already see our altitude prediction there is showing we'll be level 3,000 feet at somewhere around Hewitt or just after, which is pretty good. Our ground speed's a little higher than we used for our calculation, so that means that it sort of explains why this is just probably a little bit beyond where we want to be. But as we descend and we get closer, we can start to tidy it up and steepen the descent if we need to. Okay, the next thing I have done is just changed over a couple of the frequencies. So we'll go into audio and radios. We can see we've got India Echo Bravo 1110.3, so that was the ILS frequency. And then we still have Wellington 1123 in the backup. So we can see we're within 48.5 nautical miles from Wellington in a straight line. So there's Wellington there. I'll zoom this in a wee bit. And life is good. We at this point we don't have any descent indicated on the cabin. So the cabin altitude got up to 8,000 feet and it's just staying there. So the differential pressure will increase and then the cabin will start to descend. And it should really be descending already, to be honest, but again I'm not entirely sure how the system works in this aeroplane, or let alone how it's modelled in the sim. Not necessarily the same thing, that's for sure. Okay, ground speed's coming back towards 300 knots, which is what we've made our calculation on, so that's good. And we can go ahead and check the ADAS at Wellington, so that's 126.9. So we'll just pop that on there. And let's wait and see, that should pop up momentarily.
Wellington Airport
There it goes.
Uniform 0600 Zulu. Flight 129er at tree 6. Visibility, tree. Sky condition, few clouds at 1,000 feet, few clouds at 4,700 feet, few clouds at 11,600 feet. Temperature, niner. Dew point, 10. Altimeter 29.901. ILS runway 16 in use. Landing and departing runway 16. VFR aircraft say direction of flight. All aircraft read back hold short instructions. Advise controller on initial contact you have uniform.
Okie dokie. Let's set that up as guard.
Airport information uniform 0600 Zulu.
Okay, so the wind was quite a bit different to reported on the METAR. So that's the real world weather system in the flight sim. So clearly it's not as accurate as we'd like it to be. So there was quite a bit of crosswind, 130 at 36 I think it was. So it's much windier than it actually is there in real life. So this will make for some interesting activity on approach. That should be pretty rough on the approach, quite a bit of crosswind. So yep, you'll get to see me make a total dick of myself. And the QNH 2991 was pretty close. I think it was 1015 from memory. So that's more or less 1013, so pretty close compared to the real world. And the clouds were probably a little less than they were in real life as well. So we'll see, it looks pretty cloudy up there at the moment. Alright, that's coming up on OMDOC, so certainly we're above 5,000 feet. We're still looking good for 3,000 feet here at around Hewitt, so we'll probably end up early. And in fact, our ground speed started to slow below 300 now, so now we're sort of compensating for the calculation being slightly above 300 knots for the first part. But at some point, it's going to come back the other way, so we can see we're already expecting to be quite low, so we might even reduce our rate of descent shortly. So I think it was OMDOC's at or above 6, wasn't it? So we've done that obviously, and it'll be Phoenix is the next point there, so let's double check that. Phoenix at or above 5, and Hewitt at or below 6. That's one thing I need to do is set up the minimum. Okay, so our minimum was 300 feet, so we can set that up. PFD, minimums, Barrow, 300, enter, and there it is. Okay, it's level 150, so I'll push B is 1015. Well, that's pretty good. That's just what it should have been based on the METAR, but it's more like 1013 on the ground there. Okay. So cabin's still not descending, which is surprising. You can see that our differential pressure is almost back to 0, but we've still got 8,000 foot cabin altitude, so you know that should have kept the diff quite high, and the cabin altitude should have just been descending already, because we're almost at ambient atmosphere in here. Okay, ground speeds drop quite a bit. I can increase the power actually, and that will just bring our speed up a touch. Only 9 knots outside, and the air's nice and smooth. Bit of icing. We'll turn everything on. So in an aircraft with pneumatic de-icing boots like the TBM, so such as this, there's different techniques. You can actually see the animation, which is pretty cool. There was a sort of the technique was to wait until you have a certain depth of ice built up onto the boot before activating it. And when I started flying citations with de-icing boots like this, we were taught to just, as soon as you enter icing conditions, just turn them on. And that seemed to be pretty effective. And so what you end up seeing is that operates in a sequence over time. I'm not sure what the timer will be in this aircraft, but when the lights are on, it's showing that that de-ice boot is lit. So it's just going to work through every 2 or 3 minutes. It will inflate the left boot, which will be this green light here, and then it will inflate the right boot. And probably, is there one on the tail? Should be one on the tail here as well. But don't get me wrong, it's pretty awesome to have lighting as, icing as a feature in the sim, but it's clearly excessive. You know, to fly through a little bit of cloud and get all of this ice. We're flying into a real wall of it here. So this will be interesting. We might start reducing the speed in anticipation of some turbulence going to that cloud. Approaching Phoenix at or above 5,000 feet, there'll be no issues for us. We can see that we'll be at 3,000 feet well before Hewitt. So I will just reduce the rate of descent just a little bit. Okay, India Echo Bravo, so the ILS DME is identified there now, so the airfield is just out in that direction under all that cloud. So I haven't practiced this flight ahead of time, 10,000 feet. We'll go ahead and turn the pulse lights on. So whatever happens here is what's going to happen. So I'm going to have to do a little bit of autopilot gymnastics because I haven't set the approach up in the FMS. Essentially it's just going to fly these waypoints. So at some point I have to change over to green needles and manually capture the ILS. It's not going to do it automatically for me. So essentially what I'm planning to do is once we get to Hewitt, I'll have my heading bug pre-selected for this track here, and then I'll use that time to switch over to green needles and we'll fly the intercept manually. Okay, you see that's extended out a bit, so I'll just come down a bit more. Okay, passing Phoenix at above 5,000, so we can now descend to 3,000. We need to be at or below 6 at Hewitt, which I think will be fine. And because our ground speed came back quite a bit from 300 knots, then that's why we've ended up low. But as I said, much better to end up low than it is to end up high. Alright, we're into the Merc. But that's cool. I can go ahead and dim this down a bit. So this is a really cool feature which I found out eventually. The YouTube simmer Curly, he was the one who he does some good tutorials for the TBM, and it was actually him that showed me, or via his video, where that button was. So thank you for that. Okay, just need to make sure we're under 6,000 feet at Hewitt. And it looks like we're getting a bit high now, so I'm going to increase that rate of descent again. And just start bringing the power back as well. So we're abeam the airfield. Only 10 knots here. So if there's 38 knots on the ground, it said there was 48 knots at Kaukai, which is here, then there does seem to be a discrepancy between the winds aloft and the winds on the ground, which is a bit of a shame. Okay, I've just recalibrated the altimeter, so now it's 2991 on the ground, 1013, so that's all set. Okay, we can see that airframe de-ice is still going on for us. And we're just sitting on 1 degree, or minus 1 degree I should say. We're getting all this ice, but it's excessive. The animation is just a bit excessive. But it's fine, it adds a little bit of theatre, even if it is exaggerated. Okay, looks like we'll be fine for Adel below 6 at Hewitt. Let's keep that power coming back. Okay, so the heading from Hewitt to Whitby is 071, so I'm going to go ahead and set that up now. Okay, now we're starting to see the wind increase. Okay, 071. So because of that wind there, if it stays the same, we'll need a bit more, so I'll just add on. I'll make that 075 initially. I'll let the aircraft start the turn, and then I'll change over to heading mode. And I'm going to reduce the power as we start getting close to this sector here, because it's going to be all happening pretty quick. So 200 knots would be good. Alright, round it goes. Cabin's finally descending, but there's no way that cabin is going to make it down. We've only got 5 minutes to go. 5 5s are 25, so we would have only lost 2,500 feet off the cabin at 6,800 feet. So that means we'll get a really bad bump in the cabin. So that cabin should have started descending much earlier. We've got 1,000 feet to go. Alright, this is good. Really good. Okay, speed's coming back. I'm going to come back to 180. Very nice. In fact, things are looking so good here that I am just going to use the FMS to align me, and then I'm going to intercept once we get aligned. So I'll set this up for the inbound heading. Okay, we're leveling up 3,000 there. And I'm going to change over to green needles once we get inbound, because so far it's doing a good job. There's 180 knots, 12.4 miles. Because I'm going to have a little bit of time, a couple of miles to get it squared away here. Just going to turn the instrument lights on. Oh, and we're actually out of the cloud too. Oops. Oh, very good. Well, there's the runway. That was easy. This is so Whitby area. Looking back up, this Lake Kapiti Island, sorry, and Paraparaumu is over here. It should start that turn. I'm going to hit heading here because it should have already started the turn. And we'll change over. Okay, there's the loc. Hit approach. Loc is captured. See, it lulled me into a false sense of security. It was all going so well. But fortunately, with quite a strong wind here, the ground speed has slowed right down, so it's meant that's actually quite a tidy turn onto the loc, which could have been worse. But again, this is why you just have to really monitor this thing like a hawk, and if it doesn't do what you're expecting it to do, be ready to intervene. Okay, glide slope is alive, getting pretty bumpy. Here's the terrain I talked about that we'd see on final, so keep an eye on this radio altimeter, see how low it gets. I'll extend gear and flap shortly, so we'll just come into 178 knots to configure. Heading bags aligned. And bearing in mind that the last flight I did into Christchurch, the ILS seemed to be quite high, so I'll try and disconnect a bit earlier. Standing by for glide slope. There it goes. Okay, gears down, flaps set to takeoff. Looking now for 160 knots. So I'll try and disconnect a bit earlier this time. 36 knots, so that says the ATIS reported. And it just seems to be flying high. It did this last time too, didn't it? So, okay, we can disregard the 3000. Just check the missed approach altitude again was 3000, so that is set. I'll just crack that off one, and then it stops that flashing. You can see we're down to 1800 feet as we cross this terrain over Newlands, this area is called. And here's the actual city of Wellington is just over here on our right. So we're not doing too badly. Can't see a Papi yet. So gears down 3 greens, flaps to take off, initial separator can go on. I'll go ahead and put the landing lights on now. So we're down to 1600 feet, so it's about 500 foot difference. See, 14. So this terrain's about 500 feet high. Looks like a big ship in the harbour. Very cool. I think I do actually have an add-on scenery installed for Wellington, but I don't think I've checked it out yet. Now we seem to be getting low, so the speed's dropping. 140 knots is fine. Okay, I think I'm going to, there's an inertial separator, disconnect and hand flight from here on in. So here we go. Autopilot yaw dampers off. Some traffic down there. I'm just keeping the speed up for the time being. And in the event of a missed approach, it's straight ahead climbing 3000. The wind's changed now to be pretty much straight down the runway. It's showing 158 at 27. So the ATIS is off again. Okay, there's 1000 feet, so I'll go to flaps to landing. Catch that balloon. Let the speed come back to about 100 knots. So we've only got, still 26 knots, so we're going to have a very low ground speed here. We've got a ground speed of 80 knots. A bit high, but the ground speed's so slow that I can just push the nose down. That flight director's not helping me at all, so I'm going to turn that off. So I'm pretty much just flying visually now. Looks like the last aircraft is airborne. And it's actually pretty smooth. One straight down the runway. Getting a touch low. It's 500 feet, stabilized here. Gear is down, flaps down. So just try and make very small corrections. Still going pretty quick. I'll just start reducing the power and bring that speed back to about 80 knots now. No PARPy.
Minimums.
Okay, visual continue. Keep the power coming back. 20 knots on the nose, so it's pretty good. So the profile feels okay. We're obviously well below the glide, but I'm happy with the profile. Okay, power's coming off. Okay, into beta. Here's the taxiway braking. Okay, out of beta. Alright, so there we go. So that was IFR from Timaru to Wellington, flying a Ward 3 Bravo Star, and the ILS for 16. So fortunately we didn't get too much mucking around with the FMS this time, so that made our life pretty straightforward. And the conditions were also a bit different to reported in real life. So, but yeah, not an unusual day for Wellington. Pretty standard sort of stuff, to be honest. Windy and turbulent on the approach. So I hope you got something out of that. Scott S, this one was for you, buddy. So hope you might have picked something up. Any questions on that, definitely let me know, and I'll endeavour to answer those either in the comments or I can do another video for you. So we'll set the break and wish you a good evening or a good morning, wherever you are. Bye.